Hi everyone. In this tutorial, I'll be taking you through the process of loading data to the 2014 AOP. So the first step in all of this is to open a data form. And to do so, you need to go to the Smart View tab up here, click on the panel, which will reveal this panel over here. Click on Shared Connections, type in your password, which is the same as your Windows login. Click on the drop-down until you see Hyperion Planning Fusion Edition. Open up the server, open up LifeTech, open up Forms, and AOP Forms. So there's two sections under here. These are the generic forms for loading things like freight, variable cost, and OPEX, hence the name. And this next one down here is headcount related information, which I'll show you here in a little bit. So let's start by opening up a data form for OPEX. That can be done by clicking on, with your right mouse button, hit Open Forms. Just double clicking on that form itself or clicking on Open Form here. So I'm just going to double click and open up this OPEX form. And when it loads, you'll see that you'll have a drop down up here at the top and then the form right here in your main window. So the important part about this is getting a cost center. So the first step is to find a cost center that you're working with. You can do so by either navigating through these, which are going to be in your organizational order, or you can just type it in something like 121,001 and hitting enter. So once you've done that, it actually hasn't loaded the form for 121,001 yet. You need to press refresh. Once you've done that, it'll actually now load the form for that particular cost center. Now there's some important things to know about this form itself. And the first is these colors are important. So this blue section up here, this is for information only. So it tells you the account number, it tells you what period you're working with, or quarter or year total. This yellow section is where the information actually gets entered. And these gray sections down here are the locked cells are for calculation. So anything that's gray you can't actually enter information to, or you'll get this error right here. So let's enter a piece of information just to kind of see how it works. So if I put a 100 or 1000 in there, first thing you'll notice is this cell is turned from yellow to dark yellow. What that means is that information has not been submitted to the database yet. So if it's dark yellow, it only lives on your computer, and if it's light yellow, it's on your computer and also on the server. So once I've done that, I can hit submit, and that'll put that information onto the server itself. So I'll do that again a little slower so everyone can watch it. You can type information into the cell itself. It's dark yellow, Smart View, submit data. Now that information has been pushed to the server. Anytime you're unsure of what's on the server itself compared to what's in your particular form, click on refresh, and that'll re-pull the information back from the server and put it on the form. So let me zero this out so I don't change somebody else's AOP and resubmit it to the database. Now if you're getting an error when you try to submit a 0, which is often common, there's an option you need to change. So if you go up to Smart View and Options and Data Options, so this Submit 0 button here needs to be turned on, and that will allow you to submit data back to the server. One other important option while I'm here is that if you're getting a cell or a form pop up on you and saying no data on the form, check to see if suppression is turned on, and that's also under this particular form window, this option window. So if you have no data suppression turned on here, or down here, that means that none of the information is coming back from the server and being put on your sheet. So make sure that you turn these off if you're getting an error saying no data on this form. Once you've done that, click on Save as Default, and you'll go back in there. So now let's move on to some of the other forms that are on the AOP Freight Variable and OPEX folder here. And the next one is Freight Cost. Freight Cost is organized by these regional members here. and by account. So there's no drop down. And entering information is just like entering information for any of the other forecast processes. The next one is variable costs. And variable cost works identically to the OPEX form that I showed you, except that it has a different set of accounts here. And these accounts obviously correlate with the variable costs themselves. And it also has a limited set of options available for the cost centers, which are the ones that correspond with the manufacturing, ops, and service. So an important change this year that everybody needs to be made aware of is that we're not providing any OPEX custom forms this year because everybody has a different way in which they want to work, and they were just becoming too many and too complex. But to alleviate that, in this version of SmartView, you're allowed to build your own custom OPEX form. And the easiest way to do that is to open up the form for OPEX. And once it's opened, go to the SmartView tab up here, Planning tab, and hit Analyze. What that'll do is it'll turn that form into an S-base type data pull. And the difference between this and S-base is that the rows and columns are the same, but this panel here, this point of view member, is all of that top row information. So it's the stuff that's fixed that applies to everything that's on the sheet. And modifying this is a pretty simple process. All that you need to do is, let's say you've got multiple cost centers in which you want to work with. You want to click on the drop down here, navigate through the cost center, find one here. So I'm going to click on these cost centers here. I'm going to add them to my window. I'm going to remove the member that was already there. I'm going to click on OK. And I'm going to take that and I'm going to drop it on my window itself. So what that's done is that's replicated, sorry about those. That has replicated all of these cost centers on the form and has allowed me to work with more than one cost center by itself. So this form is completely editable. You can delete what you don't want. You can add columns. Let's say you want to have something like just year total here. Excuse me. And you click on refresh. And now you've got the year total here. It's gray because you can't actually modify a year total, but you get the idea that you have full flexibility to make your own OPEX form that you can use to submit data into. So some of the great things about this is that it also handles formulas. So if you have a template that you use for your particular cost center owner, you can write a formula that says equals sum if this column, this criteria, this total. And it'll actually work to load the data in there itself. So once you hit submit data, it'll push that in there. So the only thing you need to know about that is that when you hit refresh, either here or here, that information will not pull back from the server. It'll actually take the default value of that particular cell itself. So if you hit refresh, know that this is going to be the formula's value, not the value on the server. And if you hit delete and then refresh, you'll actually get the value itself. In a later demo, I'll actually show you how to pull the stuff out of S-base so you can really validate that total. But in this case, you can use it here as well as long as you hit delete or make a copy of it. So please take advantage of this because it's a very handy feature to be able to modify your own SmartView form to submit data into Hyperion Planning. So now let's move on to the next section, which are the headcount forms here. So I'm going to open up a headcount form, and I'm going to open up with the current employee form. So what this form is this is the basis for driving the headcount calculation that gets used for comp and benefits in the prior form. So in this case, there's nobody in this cost center, but let's try to find a cost center with somebody in it. So 142,001. Not sure if this is a valid cost center, but let's check it out. So I hit refresh now. You can see that a bunch of names have appeared. What these are these are the names associated with this cost center. And these are their employment statuses. So a 1 represents employed, whereas a 0, not employed. You can also enter partial information in here, like a 0.5, and it'll calculate half a period. It works the same way as all the other forms, where you hit submit, and that information goes into the database itself. It also has the ability to load temps. So if you see down here this T underscore, this is somebody who is employed through the company's payroll but not considered a full-time employee of the company. So you can modify them the same way and just know that they don't receive any benefits from the company. You can also do custom forms with this. So by clicking on the Analyze, you can modify this to have all of your cost centers or employees that are maybe not in cost centers you own but should be transferred in. All that information is available to you here. There are other forms out here for headcount, and this is the headcount by organization. What these are a summary of every cost center under the forecast member that a particular owner has. So something like G&A EHS, these are all the employees that are available for that EH&S department. So same concept, entering a 1 or 0 will change their employment status, and then hitting submit will push it back to Hyperion Planning itself, where it'll recalculate. So now let's actually submit one so I can show you what happens. So I've changed that to 0. I'm going to submit data. What it's doing now is it's kicking off a calculation that will go through and calculate their compensation and their benefits and move that information over to the financial statement database. And you'll notice it's taking a long time, which is a good thing. It's working through this big, massive calculation that's basically working for every cost center and every employee. But eventually, this process will fail out, which happens right here, and you get this error. This is actually a good error. What this tells you is that it's cutting off your calculation time so that the database doesn't hold your connection. But the good thing is it's continuing to calculate in the background. So when you see this error, don't get too concerned that something's broken. Just know that the calculation is continuing to run. So if I click on OK, you'll notice the cell's still dark yellow, but if I hit refresh, that information will actually be in the database. So like I said, don't get too concerned. Just realize that it's a good thing that that's happening. The calculation is just continuing to push on in the background. This is a good opportunity for me to explain what's happening in the background while that calculation is running. What this is here is an example for a given employee and for each region and how their total compensation and benefits package is calculated. So the first step in this is to take their salary, which is supplied to us by HR, and add any additional perks or benefits that employee might receive that's individual to them. Things like position allowance, long-term services, car services, anything that can be applied directly to an employee is added on top of that. The next step is to apply merit, and merit is a percentage of their total salary that is applied from April through December. So for example, you would think this would be $3,000 if it were applied for the full year, but it's only applied from April through December, so you get $2,250. And that yields total comp, which is moved from the employee database over to the salaries and wages system calculated line in the fin statement. The next section is pension, and pension in the GC is fairly unique. It takes a percentage of the salary with a max out and then adds on top of that a fixed amount. I'm not going to go through a full example here because it's actually different for each legal entity, but if you go out to our LifeLink page, you'll see how that calculation is done for a given employee. In the EU, it's just a percentage of their total comp, and that is all added up and moved over to the pension line system calculated in the fin statement. The next one is benefits, and in the US, that's a fixed amount per month of 1175 per employee, and in Greater China, it's a percentage of salary with a max out again, also available on our LifeLink page. And for the rest of the world, it's just a percentage that is based upon their salary. State taxes is unique to the US only, and it's $434 per employee. And the next one down here is taxes. The taxes in the US is on a max out principle of 115K. So for the first 115K of an employee's salary, it's 14.5% is the rate. Up and beyond that, it's 7.5% for the employee. The rest of it is, again, just a percentage of salary, and then that adds up to total taxes, and then total down here for everything else. So in the final portion of this training, I'm going to teach you guys how to add to-be-hired employees, and those are those employees that are going to be hired for the back half of 2013 or anytime in 2014. And the process starts by opening up the to-be-hired form here. And as you can see that there are basically two sections. You have the TBH ROIs on the top and just TBHs on the bottom here. So the difference between the two is ROI stands for rest of year, and that applies to anybody that's planned to be hired after the August 31st cutoff. So anybody hired in September, October, November, December of 2013, you want to include them here in the ROI section in order to get credit for that employee being on the payroll. In this section is TBHs, so that's anybody that you plan on hiring in 2014 alone, and the difference is just for your benefit only, so don't worry that we're checking it, it's more for your tracking on your end. Now within an individual employee, you can see that there's ROI 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 through 14 for both of those. The real big difference between those is that it drives a different percentage for ICP. So TBH01 and TBH ROY01 drive 5% ICP off that employee's salary. So it's important to make sure you get accurate within the pay bands. Operating this form is pretty simple, just a matter of typing in the head count and typing in the rate per head. Now if you've got multiple head count, you want to provide a blended rate. So let's say this is my blended rate per head, 20,000 for per person, so that would actually translate to 40,000 of total salary for this particular line item here, and hitting submit. A few things I'd like to caution you guys on is using negative headcount. You can use negative headcount if, say, you want to get rid of somebody without naming their head. The downside of that is that you also have to provide the rate that they're going to be let go at. So in this case, it's actually calculated a negative 10,000. Quite often we get questions of what happens if I put a negative 1 here and a negative 10,000 here. Well, that'll result in a positive 10,000 salary because it's a multiplication of headcount times rate per head. That concludes this training. We provided additional training for SBASE on the next section, but please feel free to reach out to us if you have any additional questions that aren't covered here. Thank you.